Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown from A Sort of Interesting Life, and you're joining me on a very oddly lit boat. Thought I quite like that dramatic shadow I'm casting up there. So anyway, moving on to this actual video. What's it all about? Well, I've been going through a few different ideas for videos and answering more of the questions that I'm commonly asked, and one of the big ones is, once I tell people what there is on board and go through the various lists of features and that sort of thing, when people say, haven't you got a telly or anything like that? And I'm like, no, I don't really want a telly. I've never been a big fan of watching a lot of it. And they'll always have that instant reaction, or not always, but very commonly have the reaction of, what, you haven't got a telly? Don't you get bored? And generally sort of can't believe, wow, what on earth does he do? And I think that there's this feeling that I literally spend all my time doing this. I'm bored. I thought I would actually get around to doing the Boredom video, and there's no more perfect a day for it. Let's take a look out of the window. And as you can see, even though it's only about 4:30, it's extremely dark, it's extremely wet, and this is pretty much how it's been since dinner time. Anyway, on to the boredom talk, and perhaps if I drone on and on in this video like I do sometimes, by the end of it, then you will truly know what boredom is. So, the first thing I'll say is, the telly element of this question that I often get is, it's just irrelevant. I mean, personally, I've never been that into television. I mean, used to be a big fan of The Simpsons and Neighbours and that sort of stuff. It's nice to watch Family Guy once in a while, but I'm not really interested that much in the general. I mean, certainly with the recent flux of reality TV and things like that, it's just got no real interest to me, and it was never a part of my plan to have a television on board. I mean, just to add that extra cost and general, yeah, it's another thing that you've got to have on board. It's never really interested in me. So that, first of all, I mean, telly's not a big thing, and as well, because I grew up just about in the internet age, and for most of the last years of school I had internet access. Obviously, for me, having something like an iPhone and an iPad that I'm filming on right now means a lot more to me in being able to speak to people on Facebook and all that sort of stuff, and respond to comments on YouTube. I mean, as some of you may know, I get about 500 comments a month on YouTube. The other day I had 80 odd messages stacked up on Facebook, and I mean, that's a full-time job in itself, is responding to everyone. So I apologise now that it often takes me a few days to get back to people, but that's just another thing of why, to me personally, not having a telly is not that big of a deal when everything I do pretty much is internet based, and obviously sometimes you run out of internet signal in the more rural areas, and you just have to deal with it. But secondly, I'm not sure what people think the difference between being bored on a narrowboat and being bored in a house is, other than in a house you would have more space. So that's something I've never quite been able to really understand. But obviously I know people think, oh, look at that, Dan's on a little 30-foot boat, he's only got 15 foot of indoor space, no telly, what on earth does he do? And like I say, the real thing is, I get this feeling that people think that I spend 23 hours a day on a narrowboat, don't leave and don't do anything. Whereas, as a lot of you who watch my other videos will know, I am very often out doing a lot of things. The real thing with my narrowboat life, and what I've always wanted the boat to be, is, first of all, a cheap way of living. And for me, luckily on my little 30-foot boat, I've been able to achieve a very low cost of life. But beyond that, the real reason and appeal of living on a boat is the natural, being out here in the middle of nowhere sort of element. And that, as for the last 6 years or so, I've really been into me outdoors and all that sort of great, yeah, let's go camping and biking and all this sort of stuff. And obviously having basically a mobile headquarters. And it's that fundamental idea that the boat is the base for, rather than the actual life that I live. And I can never quite get people to understand that this is what my boat life is about. It's about being able to travel down the canal, set out from all sorts of different locations, and already having a love for the outdoors, walking, biking, astronomy and all that sort of stuff. Being able to be just out in places like this, and you'll see some of the scenery from the canal in a minute. I can start from places like this and walk further out into rural areas, and that's the heart of what I absolutely love. And I mean, for example, this, if I moor up in the church area, I can get out to Llangollen, which is somewhere over the hills, and within 20 minutes I can be literally starting a walk up places like this. And that's fundamentally what my life is all about. And I can never really grasp, or never really make people grasp that I don't just sit on a boat all the time. The whole idea of me having a boat is being able to get out and do all these things and not have to work every day and all that sort of stuff. I mean, if you can set out from somewhere like that, oh yes, of course, I've even added a kayak to things recently. And so something like that and me astronomy, you can't get a more perfect vessel than a boat to be out in the middle of nowhere, really dark skies. For astronomy, I just absolutely love. And being able to have these amazing, perfect places for it, which I would in the past have had to walk for maybe an hour to get to with a telescope, it's just stuff that wouldn't have previously been possible. And equally, obviously now the kayak, I can literally inflate it, and I have been recently stepping off the boat onto the kayak already in the water and not actually stepping on dry land, paddling about 2 miles downstream, 2 miles back up, and then getting back on board as if nothing's ever happened. When I'm actually sat on board, often either speaking to you lot here or actually getting some proper work done and writing away. And it's, well, for example, today it's been terrible weather, raining, pouring down, all that sort of usual, oh, it's grim, yeah, don't want to do anything, can't go outside and can't go on these excellent miniature adventures on the bike or on the kayak. And so what I've literally done is sat in front of the fire, feet up, and gone through a couple of me poems and probably spent about 2 hours writing and rewriting just a couple of lines. And it's the sort of thing that, as part of what I do and what I enjoy doing, it's perfect. I mean, I'm out here with a fire crackling away, with rain on the roof, literally writing poems. And that to me is everything I would have ever wanted it to be. If we just glance to my ridiculously coloured bike out on the very wet stern here, I should also point out that as I do also work part-time, that's another 2 days that I'm not just sat looking at the camera going, I'm bored on the boat. And that's something that a lot of people seem to forget, that you have to actually do some work sometimes. So I suppose we should really wrap things up, and I'll say ultimately, obviously different people have different interests, and a lot of different people live a lot of different lives. For me personally, living on my tiny narrowboat, no television, that's fine. As fundamentally, like I say, the narrowboat is where my things are, where I can go to sleep, where I can keep warm in front of the fire, where I can do me cooking, where I can, heaven forfend, dry me undies out over the top of the fire there. And this is really what it's about for me. I mean, I'm all about getting out there, and I'm not talking about going on huge expeditions and crossing in the Antarctic, but I love to just be out experiencing just fundamentally the world around us. And that's why this whole idea of living on a tiny narrowboat and living as cheaply as I can is just the perfect fit for me. And the fact that the narrowboat happens to be located in all sorts of amazing rural places that once upon a time were exactly where I used to have to walk out to just to start and just to get to these amazing bits of scenery and that. I mean, I'm now, like I say, stepping off the boat into it and then only going into better places. And that's the fundamental heart of why I want to live on a boat and what I love about life afloat. You've obviously got all sorts of different boats and people doing all sorts of different things, and you have to consider, ultimately, I spend little time out of the day on the boat in normal circumstances. Obviously wet weather like this, I'm in here and I try and use that time wisely, getting jobs done and trying to write as much as I possibly can, and hopefully give you some more things that you might enjoy. But it all comes down to the individual. I mean, I can easily imagine if I had a super big boat and an unlimited budget, having some sort of super internet setup and having a huge telly on the bottom wall and maybe some games consoles plugged in, and it'd be like the old days at my mum's house, and oh yeah, that'd be great. But fundamentally now, I've sort of, my life's changed over the last few years, previously to living on a boat, which has led me to think, hang on, living on a boat, not really having much stuff, Sounds like a plan to me. It's certainly not for everybody, I can say that, and I can certainly imagine that my lifestyle would drive some people absolutely mad. Something that I think helps as well for me with spending a lot of time, especially on the dark nights when I'm on board in this sort of weather, is my continuous obsession with podcasts and audiobooks. And anyone who's watched my videos previously will know I always mention them and always talk about listening to audiobooks and that. And I mean, that definitely, having a voice in the background is much better than having voices in your head. And I don't know, perhaps this is all just a voice in my head speaking now. Anyway, on that bizarre note, I'm going to draw this video to a close. Hope you've enjoyed some of the little cutaway bits of scenery and things from non-boating life, which are fundamentally why I live on a boat, ironically. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and check out my other videos for a load more of various bits and pieces from living on a boat and scenery from the canal. Obviously there's going to be a lot of kayaking, biking, walking and all that sort of stuff thrown in too. Feel free to like the Facebook page, feel free to follow me on Twitter, and feel also completely free to add my personal account on Facebook. I know there's an awful lot of you who have now, and you're certainly keeping me busy, so thank you very much for that. I do post a load of pictures and stuff from just general what's out of the window. So, until the next time, check out my 2 books, The Narrowboat Lad and The Narrowboat Lad Living the Dream, and well, have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you around soon. Farewell.